Vietnam was supposed to be a modern war, fought with sophisticated equipment and conventional weapons of mass destruction. But one of the most effective devices for saving American lives walked on four legs. This is the story of America's forgotten heroes. Dogs who braved countless dangers and brought our men home alive. The jungles of Vietnam. In this deadly place, dogs use their senses to see, smell, and hear dangers before they claimed American lives. Separated by only a leash, handlers and dogs cared, shared, and looked out for each other. They were teammates. Handlers like Spencer Dixon and his dog Shack formed special bonds.
We were also attached to these dogs, these animals that had feelings. They hurt, they cried, they got sad, they got happy. They saved a lot of boys' lives.
For the military, dogs were nothing new. During World War II, dogs saved thousands of lives. They even parachuted into remote areas to help perform rescue operations. In Korea, the Army estimates that dogs reduced casualties by 65% in the areas in which they served. In the jungles of Vietnam, dogs and their handlers played an even larger role. Scout dogs walked point in front of human patrols and searched out enemy traps and ambushes. Sentry dogs defended the perimeter of military bases. Tracker dogs pursued fleeing ambushers and located lost soldiers and downed pilots. Water dogs were trained to smell enemy divers hidden beneath the surface of rivers. John Flannelly, a 20-year-old handler from Massachusetts, always had dogs, but this didn't prepare him for a German shepherd named Bruiser.
They had told us that this dog was going to be my new best friend, and I would probably get closer to him than any human being that I have ever known in my entire life. And they were right. I was closer with that dog than most people are with their wives, their children. I mean, we were inseparable.
September 1969, 12 miles south of Da Nang. Bruiser and Flannelly lead their platoon through enemy-controlled territory.
When all of a sudden, Bruiser just stopped dead in his tracks. And his nose was up, and his ears were twitching, and I noticed some movement from the bush. I had to make a decision, and I chose to fire. Next thing I know, all hell broke loose. There were automatic weapons fired, hand grenades, rockets being fired. It's like the 4th of July. I looked down, I thought my arm was blown off. My whole side was blown open. I could actually watch my left lung filling up and down, and then I just watched it slowly deflate. And Bruiser was just standing next to me, looking at me. He had a very sad look in his eyes. He knew we were in way over our heads. I didn't want him to be there. I didn't want him to have to see me die. I told him, I said, Bruiser, go. Go. It was very hard, because every time I spoke, I was just spitting up blood. And I was just trying to stay conscious, because I just wanted to get him out of there before I died. And he wouldn't leave. He reached down, he tried to bite on part of my uniform around my shoulder. And I grabbed onto the body harness that the dogs wore. And he dragged me back. I'm not sure how far it was. It seemed like forever. I don't know where he got the strength to pull me. While he was dragging me, he was hit, and I believe 2 times. But he was determined to get me out of there. His loyalty was immeasurable. I'll never be able to thank him enough for that. I owe my life to that dog.
Dogs like Bruiser were so effective at saving lives that they were requested by units across Vietnam. Since there weren't enough dogs to meet this demand, the military launched a canine recruitment drive. Dog owners across America donated pets to the war effort. Among them, Judy Dale of Canoga Park, California.
I know a lot of them saved lives, and some of them lost theirs. And Toro had so much energy and seemed to want to work and be active that we just thought maybe it would be a good thing to do. It may seem silly to anyone else, but to us, the dogs were our children. And when I sent Toro, it was sending our boy to war.
During World War II, all dogs were accepted. But the Army soon learned that some breeds were better suited to military life. In Vietnam, it was decided that German Shepherds were ideal for sentry and scout duty because of their intelligence and adaptability. Labrador Retrievers, with their strong sense of smell, made excellent tracker dogs. Fort Benning, Georgia.
Forward! Hard!
Here, scout dog candidates like Toro joined canine classmates in an intense 12-week training program designed to transform house pets into heroes. The key to its success lay in matching handlers with dogs that suited their personalities. In the case of Carl Dobbins, a cocky young draftee from North Carolina, this seemed like an impossible task.
When we got to Benning, they took us out to the kennels to check the dogs over, just to look at them. And we were walking out through there looking at them, and nice dogs, some would come up, some would look at you and growl. And there was one sitting back in his cage, in his box.
Here, boy.
By the time he hit the gate, just biting on it, went back. I said, well, I sure pity the sucker that gets that dog. And that was Toro. So the next day they issued, and they said, Dobbins, Toro. I said, man, you gotta be kidding. I said, I don't want that dog. So I said, well, you got him.
It is hard to say who was unhappier, the soldier or the dog. Dobbins and Toro began their training with such simple commands as sit, stay, heel, and lie down. Then they moved on to the obstacle course and more advanced lessons such as people detection and rappelling out of helicopters. For Dobbins and Toro, it took a letter from California to finally bring them together. The letter was for the dog.
Dear Toro, I want to write you a birthday letter, as this is the first birthday you will spend away from home.
We miss your little head in the refrigerator. It was always there every time I opened the door. But we're very, very proud of you, Toro. And I know you will do your very best to protect your Marine buddies and serve your country well.
I hope you have a handler who will love you as we do. take care of him and all his boys.
And know that we'll be thinking of you always. Our dearest love, Judy and Arvin.
And from then on, we just sort of understood each other. Toro was pretty much a loner, and I'm a loner. I don't have a lot of friends that I do anything with, and he didn't like the Army any more than I did.
Gradually, handlers like Dobbins learned to interpret their dog's body language. Danger was signaled by a silent visual cue known as an alert.
Have you ever observed your dog and see what he does? If he sees a squirrel, if he sees a bird or anything like that, he focuses, his ears point up, his tail may go rigid. Each dog has his own individual alert. This is why it takes this period of time for the handler and the dog to mold.
Dogs could alert to unseen danger because nature equipped them with a remarkable sensing device. A dog's sense of smell is believed to be 1,000 times more sensitive than a human's. In favorable wind conditions, dogs could sniff out enemy ambushes at up to 1,000 yards, long before any shots could be fired. Dogs could also detect human scent on tunnels, traps, and landmines. Dogs can hear high-pitched noises, including the subtle whine of wind blowing over tripwires rigged to explosives. September 1966. Dobbins and Toro were called in to save a platoon being decimated by a sniper. Toro would get just one chance to find the sniper. If he failed, he and Dobbins would become the sniper's next victims.
I sort of got Toro over and talked to him, like, where is he? What do you see? Search for him. And just watched his head move.
Search. 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 Where is he? Talk to me, Toro.
I had no idea where he was. I just went by Toro's alert. I never saw the sniper till they shot him. If they hadn't had a dog team, they'd probably lost 10 or 12 men before they'd found the sniper. So the dog team saved several people's lives just in that one instance. Without Toro, there's no way I would have made it back to the States. I wouldn't have made it probably 3 months without Toro.
When his one-year tour of duty was completed, Dobbins was shipped back to the United States. Toro remained behind, but he was never able to adjust to another handler. During the Vietnam War, dogs prevented tens of thousands of casualties and earned the gratitude of the men they had saved. Men like John Flannelly, who after being dragged to safety by his scout dog Bruiser, awaited the medical transfer needed to save his life.
I told the people from Scout Dogs that I'm not going anywhere until I see Bruiser again. I have to see him. I gotta hug him, I gotta hold him, I gotta thank him. I never saw him coming. I was just kind of in a daze from the medication. He just came up from the bottom of the bed. He just kind of crawled all the way up. So he got up, put his head on my shoulder, started licking my face. I was so happy to see him. I just hugged him and cried. I didn't know what to say. How do you How do you thank somebody who saved your life?
Walking point, the most dangerous job in Vietnam. You walk in front of your patrol, the initial point of contact for the enemy.
I was only 19 years old, and it's my first time away from home. And they ship you 10,000 miles across the ocean, and they drop you off in a country that's fighting, and now the next thing you know, you're out in the jungles. Oh, and by the way, you're the new guy, so you're gonna walk point. I was scared to death. You know, you've got snipers, you've got ground forces down there, you've got booby traps. And there's punji pits with sticks sticking up that'll run through your foot and poison you and kill you. But you don't know how to look for these things, because anyone that's been there and has come into contact with these devices were gone because they were wounded or killed. There was a sergeant came down and had given a speech trying to recruit dog handlers. And he said, well, you know, it's not a very glorious life. And I said, well, walking point and not knowing what you're doing is not very good either. They showed me different dogs, but it was the look in Wolf's eye and just the excitement that he showed when I came over to see him. And I said, I've got to have him.
Wolf was a seasoned veteran who had already survived a one-year tour of duty. In no time, the dog was teaching the handler.
First patrol I was on was outside of Da Nang, and Wolf stopped, and he sat down on the trail. That tells you right there that there is a booby trap someplace in that area.
Search.
Oh, I was new. I thought, hey, maybe I can see something, or I can check out a wire, or I'll see something hanging in a tree.
But when Charlie tried to walk past his scout dog, Wolf blocked his path.
He latched onto my hand. He gave me a friendly nip on the hand and looked at me, and I knew he would not let me go by him. I knew something was very wrong. And I looked straight ahead. Not more than 2 feet was a tripwire. I would have died right there with him if he would have hit that wire.
Good boy. Come on.
As Wolf looked on, Cargo and his men detonated the booby trap.
If the dog would have hit it, it would have probably killed the first 10 people at least, because of how close we were.
Guess I owe you one, huh?
I always pulled guard with the troops, but they wouldn't hear of it that night. They would absolutely said, no, you're not pulling guard. You get your rest with the dog, because we want you to get us where we're going tomorrow again.
In return for protection, it was the handler's job to care for his dog 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. On patrol, a handler's duties also included lugging their dog's food and water.
He got one big meal a day. I had an oversized canteen cup, and I used to feed him in that. One day, he sat there and looked at me. And I'm going, oh, you've got to be hungry. We have covered a lot of ground today. And I couldn't figure out what was the matter, so he goes over and he lays down by my pack, and my helmet was laying on the ground, and he just lays down next to it, and he puts his head up against it. And I'm thinking, no, this couldn't possibly be. He wants to eat out of that. So I picked the helmet up, I took the liner out of the helmet, I took the food, put it all in the helmet, and he ate it all up. And I looked at him and I says, "Oh, we're getting sentimental now, are we? We want to eat out of the helmet?" And he wouldn't eat out of anything but the helmet from that point on. I guess it just made him feel closer to me.
Dog teams proved so effective that the Viet Cong put a price on the head of both dog and handler. VC soldiers were rewarded for bringing in the uniform patch of a handler or the tattooed ear of a scout dog.
And they were trying to eradicate as many of us as they could, and they did a good job.
During the Vietnam War, 263 handlers and an estimated 500 dogs died on the field of battle.
99 and 9/10% of the time, when he's out at the point walking on patrols, he and his dog are the first ones that are going to get fired at.
Dogs and handlers also faced other dangers, such as snakes, heat stroke, and chemicals like Agent Orange. Each day, handlers like John Burnham risked losing their life or the life of their closest friend.
I love Clipper. It's like when I saw him through in his run, I just knew right then this was the dog for me. I'd already had dogs before. I had a sentry dog, Hans, and I'd had Timber, the scout dog, and when me and Clipper matched up, it was like we were a team.
The only place John Burnham felt safe was at his base at Dao Tiang.
Night, Clipper. You're a good boy. Hey, you too, Shadow.
And I was running to the bunker, dived into the bunker, and I was shaking like a leaf on a tree. My God, they've attacked our kennel area. Shadow! Clipper! We're freaking out because the dogs are barking and screaming and jumping up. You can hear them out there, and they're just within running distance. We can just get to them. And I said, I got to get out to get my dog. I got to get out and get Clipper. And it was very noisy in the bunker. Everybody was screaming, I want to get my dog. And the lieutenant says, no, it's an order. You guys stay in the bunker until the barrage is over. They haven't hit the kennels. Then when they hit the kennels, we just went crazy. Get up back here. Get back here. Get the dog. Clipper! And finally, the mortar attack just sort of stopped. When I discovered he was okay, I sat down with Clipper. I was crying like a little kid, and if a dog can cry, he was probably crying too. I was hugging him, holding him, squeezing him really hard, and just bawling my eyes out that he was okay.
But other dogs were not as fortunate.
And it was the most difficult thing I could ever explain in my life is seeing these poor dogs bleeding and crying. And then someone flicked the light on, you just saw the mass of blood draining out of the kennel walls. Oliver Whetstone, he was sitting there with his dog, Eric, and he had him in his arms, and Eric was pretty much almost dead. He was bleeding so bad, and he was just so chopped up with the mortar and shrapnel rounds that McClellan came up to him, another dog handler, and says, Ollie, we're gonna have to do something with your dog. So he took the limp dog in his arms and took him out beyond the kennels and put him out of his misery.
Easter Sunday, 1969, was a bad day for the men of the 101st Airborne. Paper, a scout dog who had saved many of their lives, was critically wounded. Handler Tom Hewitt felt his pain most of all.
That dog was like my hand. If I move my fingers, I don't have to tell my fingers what to do. He became so much part of you that if he wasn't there, it was like you were missing your hand.
For 3 days, Hewitt and his comrades carried Paper through enemy territory until they could be evacuated. When veterinarian Dr. John Kubitz examined Paper, he was shocked that the dog was even alive.
Initially, when Paper came in, he was almost comatose from loss of blood. There was no very little vital signs. He had his wound wrapped with several layers of dirty rags. And when we unwrapped the leg, I don't think there was a guy in the unit that didn't almost gag from the smell. It left a hole that this hand would not cover. And when I first looked at it, your first thought is this leg has to be amputated. There's no way that you can handle this without amputation. But the Army's not looking for three-legged dogs. I can remember looking up and seeing Tom's face and thinking, boy, this guy had been through the mill. It was a friend or a brother on the table, not a dog. We went to the side and I says, Tom, this dog's not gonna make it. This leg is not gonna make it. And he says, Doc, he said, I don't care what you have to do. I don't mind going back. I'm not going back without this dog.
Hewitt's appeal convinced Dr. Kubitz to attempt a surgery he knew had little chance of success.
So we packed the leg with chloromycetin and Elase, loaded them up with antibiotics. We put a stainless steel pin into the bones to mend those.
The surgery completed, all that was left was to wait.
Everybody got attached to Paper. I can understand when the 101st Airborne was left without this dog, how they felt like a piece was missing, because this dog was so much like a human being. You didn't talk to this dog like a dog. In fact, we used to call him Mr. Paper.
Kubitz's superiors were not swayed by Paper's winning personality. They felt the veterinarian was wasting his time on a dog who couldn't possibly recover.
I shouldn't even say this on camera, but anyway, it's 20 years later, I'll let him sue me. I had a direct order to put this dog away.
If Paper didn't walk, Kubitz would be forced to euthanize him.
And for that dog to regain use of that leg and be able to extend it and place weight on it, and it's absolutely a miracle. Looking back, there is no doubt in my mind that that was a miracle, and to this day I don't know how that happened, because I know in my mind what we did.
10 weeks after he was wounded, Paper's rehabilitation was complete.
In the morning we had to say goodbye, and he was back. We knew he was going back to combat. It was a big lump in everybody's throat. I mean, it was like a child leaving home.
Only 3 days after Paper returned to duty, he and Tom Hewitt were summoned to rescue a company under attack in the Idrang Valley.
It was one of those things, at all cost, get there as fast as you can. Paper had gone up probably within 30 yards of that hooch, and he spun around real quick. I'll never forget. It was like, they're here. You knew he was close to them. And by the time I turned around and signaled, they cut loose on us. Paper and I were in the center, and we were in a crossfire. Trying to look up through the grass, and I could see him the whole time he was trying to get back to me. I could see like trails of bullets following him. They were taking shots at him. I remember him getting back to me, and he cuddled up alongside of me. He was laying so close to me, I just couldn't believe it. Gosh, I remember reaching back and saying, "Paper." And as I reached back over my side, I could feel his head that he'd been, half his head was missing. I mean, I could feel that he'd been shot.
Paper took a bullet in the back of his head, which would have killed Tom. He knew he was dead. He still insisted on carrying the dog back to his unit, and he wanted to medevac back to the 764th because Captain Kubis and the men could do miracles.
Paper's alert saved his entire platoon, but this time there would be no miracle.
Somebody higher than us, because we always said, you know, there was somebody up there, a higher power controlling this, decided for us that Tom goes home and Paper stays here.
When the Vietnam War began, Da Nang was protected by 3,500 Marines and hundreds of South Vietnamese sentries. It wasn't enough. With a remarkable combination of stealth, patience, and cunning, Viet Cong demolition teams proved difficult to stop. The best soldiers to prevent this onslaught were the war dogs. Project Top Dog and its successor, Project Limelight, would send more than 2,000 sentry dogs and handlers to Vietnam. Their task, to patrol the perimeter of dozens of bases. Among the first dog teams to arrive in Vietnam were Larry Loudner and his partner of 2 years, Cubby.
Being a dog handler is lonely because you are out there by yourself, but you're not really by yourself because you got the dog with you. It's like having another person or having a real good friend with you. And when you depend on a dog like you do in a war situation, it gets even more intense.
Loudner and Cubby were assigned to Tan Son Nhut Airfield outside of Saigon, the staging point for American arrivals in Vietnam. Unknown to Loudner, the Viet Cong planned a welcome for the 15,000 military personnel sleeping within the base.
Cubby, what is it? Come here.
I looked up and I saw probably 30 or 40 people on the other end of my post spreading out, coming through the grass towards me. I thought at first it was the South Vietnamese or the Army coming down there to support my position. And Cubby started growling, and he took off in a dead run.
As the battle raged throughout the night, that Loudner feared for his dog.
I thought he might be alive. I didn't see him anymore, but I thought he might be. But the next day when we went out on the post, we found him. He was dead. It kind of hit me then when we put the bodies in the back of the pickup, you know, what had happened and what could have happened to me. He not only saved me, but he saved the whole thing, because if they'd have shot me and Cubby, there was nothing between me and the runway. Yeah, I miss him, but I try not to think about it anymore, and I have to. That's the way I deal with it.
Over the course of the war, sentry dogs like Cubby thwarted hundreds of attacks on air bases. But naval bases built upon floating barges remained vulnerable. Viet Cong swimmers breathing through reeds or a length of garden hose were almost impossible to spot, and a single intruder could wreak havoc with explosives. In secret, the Navy conducted tests at Ben Kao Naval Base to find out if dogs could smell enemy divers hiding beneath the water.
Someone underneath water's got to breathe. If they're using a scuba gear, then the bubbles are breaking. If they're using a reed or a piece of hose stuck up to a hyacinth clump or something, the odor's still coming out. Once we deployed at Ben Kao, they never had another significant penetration or tried to penetrate into the barge itself.
The water dog program was a success, but the American military was out of time. January 30th, 1968. The Tet Offensive stunned American forces with simultaneous assaults across Vietnam. Back home, public outcry increased in volume, and politicians listened.
We have adopted a plan which we have worked out in cooperation with the South Vietnamese for the complete withdrawal of all U.S. combat ground forces.
For handlers, the joy of returning home was mixed with one overriding concern. What would happen to the dogs they had grown to love? The end of America's involvement in Vietnam was accompanied not by gunfire, but by silence. Bases and equipment were abandoned. A similar fate awaited the dogs who had saved so many lives.
The dogs were treated as equipment. The military has its policy about equipment that goes into a combat area. Officially, equipment is written off the books. This means that this equipment could be destroyed. When they pushed the American choppers off of the aircraft carriers, they were equipment. The scout dogs maybe didn't cost this much money, but the dogs fell into that category.
For handlers, the joy of returning home to their families was mixed with the pain of leaving their best friend behind. At the end of World War II, the dogs who served America faced a better future. Like other soldiers, they were shipped home and were given an honorable discharge from the military. But Vietnam was a very different war, and in our hurry to leave it behind, the dogs who had saved so many lives were forgotten, except by those who knew them best.
I thought it would be easy just to go in there and see him one more time and then leave. And then I spent many minutes there thinking about all the missions that we went on, and now I'm going to have to leave my dog. I wanted to take him with me, but the military said, war dogs are equipment. You can't take them back. they could take a disease back, if they attack a civilian, all 1,000 excuses why we couldn't take our dogs back. I knew Clipper would be fine. There's no doubt in my mind. He would have been a great pet. So I sat thinking of all these things. My God, this dog, this is going to be his grave. And right above his tree, I had this sign, you know, invest your dog, war is good business. At the time, it just disgusted me. So I reached up in the tree, I grabbed that sign down, and I busted it over my knee, and I gave Clipper a hug, and I just walked away. Couldn't do anything about it. So I left him there, and he just looked at me like I was going to be coming back.
Like many handlers, Charlie Cargo did everything in his power to try and take Wolf home with him.
I had tried through Army channels, you know, filled out paperwork, request forms, and different things that they have for you to do to bring Wolf home, out of the Army, and come home to a, you know, civilian life.
The Army gave Charlie a one-word answer: no.
It was like somebody just ripped out my heart. It's probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
Acting individually, handlers attempted to publicize the heroism and plight of their dogs. Public sentiment was in favor of bringing them home. In response, the military placed hundreds of dogs in quarantine at the Dog Detachment Center at Benoit. Since disease had claimed the lives of more than 600 dogs over the course of the Vietnam War, the dogs were closely watched by veterinarians and veterinary technicians like Greg Blackwell.
I was the guy in our little town that always had the 4 dogs following him, and I just wanted to be a veterinarian since I could remember.
If Blackwell had known what awaited him in Vietnam, he never would have gone.
I would have probably just gone AWOL, but you know, you don't know. So I went.
Of the more than 4,000 dogs that served in Vietnam, just 204 returned to the United States. Then the military decided that the risk of disease was too great. The quarantine program was stopped.
I was told that the World Health Organization just passed this new law that said no animals from Vietnam could come out. It wasn't accurate, but the World Health Organization never did pass that law. But that's what we were told.
Veterinarians in Vietnam were given just 2 options. The dogs could be transferred to the South Vietnamese Army or euthanized.
The American people should know that this is wrong. These dogs should not have been abandoned in Vietnam because they saved many lives.
They don't have a voice. They don't have a vote. So nobody gives a darn. They don't have any money to contribute to some politician.
It's extremely hard for me not to know what happened to Bruiser. It's almost as if I had a brother who was missing in action. Did he get a decent burial? Did anybody say anything nice over him? Did he suffer?
One event that is forever etched in Greg Blackwell's memory is the day he transferred 150 dogs to the South Vietnamese Army.
Sentry dogs don't cower. And on that morning when we did that, those dogs were cowering. Those dogs knew it was a death sentence for these animals. I cannot look at a German Shepherd today without seeing the eyes and souls of all those German Shepherds.
One dog the South Vietnamese refused to take was a Labrador Retriever named Booga Bear.
Booga Bear was a tracker. The dog had saved a lot of people's lives. He had found injured, dying GIs in the unit.
Since the South Vietnamese believed that black dogs are bad luck, Blackwell was left with only one option.
He tried to have the dog's last moments be very peaceful, and the drugs that you injected were very quick. You wanted to be able to hit the vein on the first try. That was the most important thing. I had got to know the dog because the dog was staying in my kennels. The animal cared nothing about itself, just in working and giving to you.
Blackwell couldn't do it. 1 week later, Blackwell found a loophole. He sent Booga Bear to work at the American Embassy in Saigon. But the dog's reprieve may have been short-lived. In April 1975, the North Vietnamese Army captured Saigon.
And I remember in '75 watching that embassy fall and the helicopters on top saying, I hope to God somebody got that dog out.
The military kept few accurate records about the war dogs, but it is estimated that more than 4,000 dogs and 10,000 handlers served in Vietnam.
Because it'd be a whole lot more than 50,000 names on the Vietnam Wall without these dogs. And I don't think the average American even knows the role these dogs played.
There is no memorial to honor the war dogs of Vietnam. Only the memories of the men whose lives they saved. Memories of courage, companionship, and loyalty so deep that it's hard for us to fathom.
course I love Shaq. Shaq was my dog. He wasn't the handlers before. He wasn't anybody after. He was my dog. Just like my kids are my kids. You're not attached to a child till after you have the child. You have the child, you change 500 diapers. You give them 500 bottles. Well, with these war dogs, I fed him 500 times. I cleaned up after him 500 times. You can't help but get attached.
But after surviving 1 full year together in Vietnam, Spencer Dixon and Shaq went on their last mission.
It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and the helicopter was going to pick us up at 3, so really I was down to the last 4 hours in the field. And Shaq came up to this canal, and he refused to go, which is what they're trained to do when they come up on some objects, like booby traps or ambushers. Well, I thought he was not wanting to go because he didn't want to jump in the water and go the other side unless I was going. I went ahead of Shaq and went across the canal. And they waited to blow the ambush until I called Shaq to me. And I called Shaq to me, and all hell broke loose then. When Shaq died, he let out a scream. It's just like pushing a button sometimes, but when he died, he let out a scream, and I'll hear it till the day I die. If he hadn't have been right there between me and that blast, heck, what it did to him, if all that would have hit me, there's no way I'd be here.
We were patrolling at about a 50-yard interval between myself and the patrol leader, and I had a fella up there with me to scan the tree line because I was devoting a lot of attention to Prince. Prince started to alert, and I said, we've got something here, and it was a strong alert. I hunkered down behind a sand dune Prince, and pretty soon he started giving a sound alert where his ears cocked up. And that means that whatever he's detecting is a whole lot closer. And pretty soon I heard it, and it was just an unbelievably large force going from my right to left across in front of us, and I mean real close, like 1 dune away. And I was sitting there thinking, gosh, you know, they're going to come over this dune and pound us. They proceeded across the way. We radioed the other squad that broke off, but there was difficulty with communication, and the other squad walked right into that force. Every one of them was wounded, and a medevac chopper came down and pulled them out. And now the force turned their attention on us. And we were running low on ammunition, and we backed off the sand dune. And I said, what are we going to do? Well, by this time we had 2 Army birds, helicopters in the air, putting in fire support for us. We radioed them and asked them if one of them couldn't dump all their ordnance and come down and pick us up, because we had no way out. And the guy said, how many guys you got? And we had 7 and a dog. And we said, we got 5. And the guy came down, and we jumped on the bird. And the guy turned around and shook his head, like we're going to get off or something. Prince is my dog, and so I wasn't leaving him behind, that's for sure. We were either all getting out of there, or we were all dying. So the helicopter pilot cranked up his bird, and these skids were dragging through the sand to get forward airspeed, and there were a lot of lights on his dash that were blinking on and off, and that's not a good thing. And he got airborne, and he took us to Quin Yon Hospital, dumped us off where the other squad got taken for their wounds, and he says, I'm never flying for you guys again. I said, thanks, once and enough. I think if Prince hadn't alerted, we would have met the same fate the other squad did.
We had received some information from a young boy that said that the VC and 2 North Vietnamese had entered his village. We set a patrol thing up and off we went to this location. There were 6 SEALs in the patrol and the dog. He could give you the accurate direction. They're coming down that trail or they're coming through this little jungle path. Prince alerted on the hooch that people were coming to it. He alerted that once they were inside the hooch, he never took his stare off that hooch. After we had entered the house, there was a little bit of a scramble inside the house, and we got to some fisticuffs and some actual hand-to-hand stuff. But once that was all taken care of, I used Prince to search the house. He alerted on one little tunnel that was empty, and he alerted on another little tunnel that was under like their cook stove, and there was one guy hiding in there, so we were able to bring him out. We felt that we had captured, probably Ho Chi Minh himself, but that's how proud we were of the fact that we had 2 generals, and they had the credentials to verify this. His alert was what really made the thing successful.
To pass the time between missions, many handlers taught their dogs tricks not found in any Army manual. For war dogs, the transition from play to work was signaled by exchanging their leather collar for a body harness.
When you put a particular collar on him, it's a working collar. Then he gets down to business. He knows it's work time. However, when you take a break, all I had to do was just tell the dog in a different tone, take a break. And the dog would just, like, now it's playtime. We took a break on a patrol one day. We were on about an 8-hour patrol. And Prince went off, and he came back, and he had something in his mouth, and he was throwing it around. And finally, he dropped it at my feet, and it was a hand grenade. Well, it scared the living daylights out of me right from the beginning because I didn't know whether the pin was either. Where did he get this thing, And it just, you don't stop to look at all the features of the hand grenade. You know that little round sucker is a hand grenade, and the first impression is to get out of here right now. So I took the hand grenade away from him. I told him no, and off he goes again. Came back with another one. Well, by now we decided we'd better follow this dog and see where he's getting this stuff from. And he had uncovered a weapons cache, and he had some hand grenades in it. And he was bringing them back thinking they were a ball.
If not found by Prince, the weapons would have claimed American lives. The Viet Cong posed the greatest threat to dogs and handlers, but the most lethal animal was almost impossible to spot.
One night, Buck and I were on patrol. It's a nighttime situation. It was very dark. All of a sudden, he stopped and he alerted. That's his alert. But he stopped and he pointed downward rather than up. I was able to see that it was a cobra. If we would have kept walking, if he hadn't alerted, I'd have stepped right on it. He yelped and then he jumped back. And I knew then that he'd been bit. I thought at that time that Buck was dead. I thought there was no chance. I just remember Buck breathing, and I could see his chest go up and down. And then I knew that the vet wasn't lying to me, that he actually was alive. And that was a surprise to me. I leaned in there and just gave him as big a hug as I could.
All handlers were protective of their dogs. Sometimes they took this to comic extremes.
First our cab, their choppers came in over the kennels, and we had asked them before several times to not fly over the kennels. It disturbed the dogs, made them go crazy, just barking, trying to get out of the cage and everything, because they thought they was going to get to go on patrol. They loved it. So Me and old Bob Payne was out there washing it down one day, and they flew over, and Bob, he just looked up right funny and looked at me. There went the hose straight up, and there come a chopper over, and the stream of water hit in the turbine in the front, and it just said whoop, toop, 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 black smoke. She sit down over there before it got to where it's supposed to go. So Bob looked at me. He said, "Uh-oh." I said, "Uh-oh, hell, you the one shot it down. I didn't." So about 15, 20 minutes later, here come a Jeep. It was going as fast as that Jeep could go. Colonel got out. He was dirty, cussing up one side and down the other. Wonder who shot my helicopter down. Old Bob said, "I did." He said, "What in the hell did you do that for?" He said, "We asked you not to fly over the kennels." I said, "That's one way to stop you. We just shoot you down." He said, "You know you can go to jail for that?" He said, "I sure can, but you won't be disturbing the dogs anymore." So they changed their route of coming in off patrol after that. They went around the kennel instead of over it.
In Vietnam, dogs were the best psychiatrists the Army had going.
Buck and I had great conversations. I talked to Buck a lot. I talked to Buck about everything. He just was like he was a person. He was a person to me because there was this language between us, and I enjoyed talking to Buck because he actually listened.
You just kind of talk to your dog the same way, like, "I'm having a bad day, this didn't go right today," and you just, it's kind of a bond that you have with the dog. It's almost like having a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a wife or something. You can talk to them, and again, you don't have to worry about them telling anything. You don't have to worry about them gossiping about it. I mean, you can talk about anything you want.
I got a letter from a girl that I had been friends with, and she wrote me a letter just saying that she was getting married, and, you know, she wished me luck and all that. And I remember I sat down in the corner and I read it to him. And, you know, he'd sit right down, he'd sit right in front of me, he'd go, like he understood every word I was saying, and he'd nod and he'd go like this, and I said, "Now, isn't this the damnedest thing?" And he'd go, "Yeah, like, this is not good." And so I just took it, I said, "Here," he'd rip it to shreds, which I thought was pretty appropriate. Dear John letters, he was really good at eating those up.
When Vietnam dog handlers look back, their memories of their dog's life-saving heroism are combined with gentler recollections.
Sometimes it got cold at night out, even in Vietnam on those rice paddies, because the wind blowing across the water. Well, I'd lay up and put the dog on the windward side and curl up to him, and it would be warm. He'd be blocking the wind, and I'd wake up, and he'd be on the other side of me. And basically all night we'd play yo-yo. As soon as I went to sleep, he'd put me on the windward side.
I remember every time it rained, you'd put a poncho on, and you'd try to get out of the rain, and it rained a lot over there. And that dog, and I'm sure every handler has the same problem, didn't like to get wet more than anybody else. You'd get that poncho on, and you'd try to find a dry place and kind of huddle down so you could keep dry. And that dog would always come underneath it, get underneath and get between my legs, and then next thing you know, you're just as wet as he is.
Pete was a clown. One time we were on patrol and I laid my helmet down and it was getting daylight and we were heading back, and he reached out and grabbed hold of my helmet and threw it over the side and into the water. Of course, it went down to the bottom of the Van Cordong River, but he was always doing unexpected things that would touch your heartstrings sometimes.
When handlers discuss the need for a memorial for their dogs, it isn't just because of their dog's heroism. It's because these dogs shared their lives as well as saved them.
They did a big part, and I think if you're going to honor the military, I don't know how you can honor them without not honoring the animals that were involved in that and gave just as much. And when you give your life, that's the most you can give.
I got a Purple Heart, but they didn't give one to the dog, but he was killed. They gave the medals to me, but it was for what the dog did.
The war dogs contributed a tremendously to the war effort and saving countless American lives. And somebody out there may have a father or a brother right now that owes his life to one of these dogs, and I just want everybody to know that these animals existed and served this country.
I'm a old dog handler. I'd just like to see him remember.
I've got to learn.